Sorry about that. I had some technical difficulties. I'm actually calling from the US and it's 3:30 in the morning, so fairly early. So first I wanted to just talk a little bit about the ISA Global Cybersecurity Alliance. That is the group that I'm a part of. And I won't go through a lot of detail in this, but one of our goals is outreach for other companies about industrial security best practices and things that people can do. I'm, as I said, with John's Manville with the um, and I'm their CISO, so I do a lot of work with JM, specifically in the OT space. But I've also worked. John's Manville's part of Berkshire Hathaway. I've done a lot of work with some of the other Berkshire Hathaway companies, and provided just guidance in how to get their programs started and best practices. A little disclaimer on the presentation. This is this is my opinion. This is not a anything referencing directly to JM or the ISA. Just put that disclaimer in there. So when I talk about the 7 steps, usually what I do is, I preface this that a lot of companies have not started down the 7 steps. They may have 1 step or 2 steps that they've gone down. But what I want to do is say you can take these out of order, but it is a good idea to get through some of these. I feel like a lot of companies skip right to down to step 4, which is, take an inventory. But there are some things that you want to do prior to having your inventory, and make sure that you do understand the business. So first step, I think this is one that a lot of companies don't do, and a lot of times they get don't get the backing of the executive team. So security threats or business risks. And I think when we start getting into the IT space and the OT space and who owns it and what should we do about it? I think we lose sight of this is a business issue. We're all part of the business, and that ultimately we've got to work together to figure it out. But one of the things you want to do is start to get engagement for your program. So, performing an OT tabletop is one of the best methods, I think, for at early stages to get everybody engaged, to make everybody feel like they're part and they understand what the issues are. What I found for these initial tabletops that are effective are engineering leaders, bringing your safety group. I would also think about bringing in your property and risk. And then a lot of times you do bring in the senior executives to really understand. So you create a simulation of an actual issue that could occur at a site, and then you start, having them realize, wow, this would have a huge impact on my business. So first, admit that you have a problem. The next step, I think that really helped me, and it's helped a lot of companies, is make sure you have a translator that can translate between the IT language and the OT language. Often we think in IT that we know we know we're smart and we can figure things out. But the engineering world is quite a bit different, and it's good to have someone with experience. I find that, what we do, you can either hire someone from the outside, but one of the things I've actually started with one person and built a team of of about 5 people in my OT security and systems group. And part of what we did was we recruited internal engineers that wanted career development and growth. So we did quite a bit with that. You can usually train engineers on IT and OT security much better than you can training someone on engineering. So, there's a couple of areas. Certain ISA has training, Idaho National Labs, probably more in the US, and there's also CISA training. And consulting groups may also get you started. The next step, which I think a lot of IT people really miss, is they don't understand what the business, it's particularly what the manufacturing process is and what's important to it. So, one of the things that I've been with my company for over 30 years. So, it's, I've got a better sense of what's going on in the business. But about 15 years ago, I really spent a few months really going to sites, going through and understanding what's critical in the business OT process. So, what components are really critical, what really makes the plant tick, what's the if this component fails, this is the most important part of the process. I think it's important to understand the process itself and the control systems that operate within that process. Um, but you want to make sure that you're doing that um, before you get too deep into the assets and the technology. Fourth step is understand your assets. So most IT people would start here. I feel like the others really help you get a better picture about what's going on. But what I've seen is you want to scan for internet facing control systems. That's always your highest risk. So any control systems that are facing corporate networks or other networks. Second, you want to scan corporate. So you want to look at what's between the corporate network and the OT network and understand if you have any control systems that are touching the corporate network. In the event of a ransomware event, that's going to be the first thing they're going to look at. So those early scans are very important. Then the next step is really map the OT architecture. So understand the components that you have. So what's part of the corporate network? What do you have? How many production lines do you have? How are they connected to each other? In ISA 62443 terms, you have zones, which from a network perspective is much like a network segment if you're on the IT side, and conduits, which are communication channels between zones. You want to identify any remote access solutions as well. So you want to understand, uh, do you have like maintenance providers that have remote access or need remote access, that type of thing. A typical OT zone and conduit architecture. This is something that's a little bit different of a concept for IT kinds of people, but I think it's valuable. First, you have, your enterprise zone, which uh, which which is kind of where all your corporate assets are. Maybe your enterprise resource planning ERP system, and then you have maybe another zone that we might call the industrial or enterprise zone. Within this, um, you'll find that these are generally the items that connect into industrial zones. These are your kind of security layer between, corporate and industrial systems. And then you want to think about, with industrial networks, do you have five major production lines in a plant? Do you want to segment those out? We look at this as kind of if one of those were to have an issue or have an attack, these zones allow you to protect between production lines. And then the conduits, again, are the communications that may go between those zones. The next thing that we really did, which I think is unique to a lot of companies, is we started to add value from the IT side to further the relationship. So, we had one member at first, as I said, now we have five. And what we started doing is that team started driving for a demand to be able to help fix network issues back on the industrial side, fix backup issues. We were able to be advocates for investments, for replacement of equipment, for that type of thing. One of the things that you got to understand is that one, the technology is changing very quickly in industrial systems, and it does need generally IT help, and then engineers can't necessarily run some of these systems themselves these days. Back years ago, you'd have a server that the manufacturer or the integrator would provide. It's a fairly straightforward system. Now we see that these environments are VMware and virtual servers, and those are very hard. They've got complexity to them, and and people may not necessarily understand on the engineering side how to manage these. We also look at the technology and make sure that we can replace the equipment. What's the long-term life cycle for those assets? Six, this is when I usually reintroduce the tabletops. So tabletops are always good. So you would simulate a typical um, cyber incident in a plant, and then we would have and then you'd want to have a group of maybe engineers, plant managers, maybe division engineers walk through how you would resolve that tabletop. So you get a great experience with the group. With this, I would say focus on confidentiality, integrity, and availability are kind of IT terms. For this, make sure that you think through safety as well. So as you're going through the tabletop, what kinds of impacts would it have to safety? Now, the other thing is, a lot of times, if you know a little bit more about the systems, you can make the tabletop very real for their production line. And so I think that's extremely helpful because people then really connect with it. I won't go through this tabletop, but I do have a few tabletops that I go through. Often one of them could involve safety systems. I've seen others that are ransomware based that are really tend to get the audience very interested in the tabletop. So finally, implement a governance program. We do have quite a few governance programs. There's a few out there, NIST 882, um, as well as ISA 62443 specific to industrial. For another session, I do talk about how to map certainly 62443 to an ISO 27001 program. But these generally are later on after you've got a base and you've got just general relationships within the organization. For the sake of time, I'm not going to spend much time on this, but one of the key things with 62443 is that in many cases it overlaps with ISO 27001. What you're going to find, though, are down at the bottom, there are some key areas that you would really focus on if you've already got like an ISO type program and you want to focus on, safety instrument systems, the whole concept of zones and conduits, that really isn't in ISO 27001. So these are going to be topics that are going to be in a industrial security framework like ISA 62443 that'll be unique. Most of the other controls that you're going to see or activities are going to be a lot more tuning, so it's not going to be whole new things. But this last section, there's about 5 or 6 things that are just unique to industrial security. Some other things for OT, and I'll wrap it up. Some of the things that it'll answer is, do you have a secure architecture? I've actually named in this some of the sections of 2-1 that may be helpful to look at. Look at your zones and conduits. One of the other things you really want to understand is, can I disconnect my IT and OT networks during a cyber event? And those specifically are in 1.4 and 1.6. And then, are my safety systems protected from cyber events? And again, I have those notated there. I think I'm out of time, but a couple of things. Immutable backups. Here's some 4 things I think you just really need to do no matter what you're doing. Immutable backups. You want to make sure that you can recover if you do have a industrial ransomware attack. Look at OT specific remote access solutions. There's a lot of remote access solutions that were made in the corporate environment. There's some things you may want to look at there. OT focused incident response. Make sure that you have a plan for what you're going to do in the environment if you have an OT issue. So, one, do you have something that tells you there's something unique going on in the OT environment? And then it also gets to things like, do you know when you're going to shut down? What's the decision I'm going to make? When I have an issue. So, but there are tools that are focused on OT incident in response, and then also OT focused vulnerability management. There's some tools that will help you with looking at whether or not you've got a vulnerability, maybe a risk in your environment. That's it for me. Sorry about all the technical issues on getting on the call and for being late. I do appreciate it.